Hi everybody, it's me again, Ahmed Kayode Alabi, and it's nice to be here. And I hope you enjoyed the previous videos on the MasterCard Foundation scholarship. And let me just quickly do a brief introduction about me before we get into the details. Basically, again, I'm Ahmed Kayode Alabi, and I'm a social entrepreneur. I'm an SDGU champion, and I'm also a two-time author. And I've been running my NGO for the past 5 to 6 years now, where we help children in underserved communities to develop life and 21st century skills in Nigeria and sub-Saharan Africa. And during that process, I've had the opportunity of applying for fellowship programs, apply for scholarships to help me in advancing my work and to also help me develop personally and professionally. So it's such a pleasure to share my experience of how I've been able to get numerous opportunities and what are the tips that has worked for me. For example, in 2020, I got two scholarships, that is MasterCard Foundation scholarship and the Achievement scholarship. And in 2019, I got the Institute of Development Studies scholarship from the University of Sussex, which means I got like 3 scholarships in 11 months. Though I've gotten like about 10 rejections as well before getting to that point. And I've had the opportunity of participating in different fellowships, such as the Carrington Fellowship or the Carrington Youth Fellowship Initiative of the U.S. Consulate in Lagos, and the Peace First Fellowship in Residence, and a couple of other applications that I've done, and a couple of grants that I have won, not so many though. So it's such a pleasure to just share the tips that has worked for me. So these tips are not absolute. They are just my personal experiences, and these are things that I've seen that has worked for me. So you don't have to follow everything that I've said here. So you have to be creative in coming up with your own ideas as well. But this will definitely help you get started. So consider this as a starting point. So what are the few things I've learned about scholarship or fellowship applications or interview? One of the first things I've learned is to document your best experiences. So sometimes we've done a whole lot of work and want to add everything into our essay or response. So it's very important to understand why you're applying for this particular scholarship program or fellowship. What are they looking for? What are you specifically looking for to learn, and what aspect of your story actually answers the questions that they're asking, or what aspect of your story is well connected to the fellowship or scholarship application. So you have to document your best experience, the experience that you think matters a lot. So I could recall when I was applying for the MasterCard Foundation scholarship. I mean, obviously I run my NGO, but I was also working with Peace First as a regional manager, and I've done a lot in terms of regional work on the larger scale. I've supported young people across 30 plus countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And I was thinking that if I should, write about my NGO in the response, I might not get because I wanted to do African international development, obviously. So I was like, I think my regional work actually qualifies more, and I should focus more on that. And I document that experience because I feel like that was my best experience to put forward. The same thing when I applied for the National Youth Service. No, not the National Youth Service, I'm sorry. When I applied for the Carrington Youth Fellowship instead, rather, I decided to document my NYC experience, one of the major projects that I did, because I felt that the project was related more to the application, and the project had more success, and the project had more impact, and I believe that that's the one that I can communicate more. So I did 6 development service projects during my NYC, but I decided to just pick one of those projects, one major project that has more impact. That was what I picked, and then that was what I used, and that was what I based my responses on. So it's very important to document your best experiences. So it's not about just answering questions. It's about also reflecting and thinking and looking at which experience is the best for me to put forward. So that's the first one. Document your best experiences. Document your best experiences. So again, qualify and quantify your work experiences and achievements. So again, when I was applying to Achieving Scholarship and some other scholarship or applications that I have done, when I was 15, I started teaching in a basic rural school in Igogo, Lagos, and I only taught for 3 months. And it was good, it was great. I also had did remedial classes for my students. So during that period, I was thinking that how, when I was writing my essay and I wanted to communicate that part, I didn't say oh, when I was 15, I taught for 3 months. I said when I was 15, I spent 768 hours teaching children, basic literacy and numeracy skills kind of thing. So rather than saying in 3 months, I converted that to 768 hours. So I was able to convert that, I was able to do that because it's, when you see that, you'll be like, okay, this is quite interesting. So for example, if you worked in a company or an organization or you volunteered for 2 years, imagine converting 2 years into weeks, maybe let's say 52 weeks, make a year, and you're 104 weeks. Or you're saying that, okay, don't let us look at weeks. Let us look at, number of days that I've spent, okay, don't let us look at days, let us look at minutes. No, don't let us look at minutes, let us look at hours. So imagine, saying that you spent 50,000 something kind of minutes. Do you know how that looks like? I mean, again, it's just being a psychologist, it works for me, and you could do the same. So that's something you could do. So that's one of the ways to qualify and quantify your work. Use numbers or true, use numbers. I could recall when I was also applying to Chevening and I wanted to communicate that I got into the Carrington Fellowship. I didn't just say that I got into the Carrington Fellowship, right? I said that I was one of the 20 Nigerians selected for the Carrington Fellowship, where I received a $5,000 grant with other 4 young people to train 280 low-income private school teachers on contemporary pedagogy and innovative teaching methodologies. So you could see what I did there. So I was able to communicate with numbers. So that is very, very important. You need to communicate with numbers, qualify and quantify your work. It's just the same when you're writing your CV and you're trying to write your description or your job description. You don't just say that I attend to customers, right? Everybody do attend to customers, every customer relationship expert or everybody who works on the front desk and works with customers. So you could say I attend to at least 15 customers every day, leading to a sales of 200,000 naira every day, or 500,000 naira every day, or 1 million naira every day. So that's a way you can qualify and quantify your work experience and achievements. So yeah, this is something that you even learn over time, as you continue to write and develop, you become creative as you continue to write. So keep writing. Every draft you've written is very important when you're applying, right? Every draft is very, very important. And that's what I used to say, your drafts then becomes, something you can build upon. So don't be scared to write. The third tips that I'll be sharing is read the question prompt. So most of the time, people don't read the question. They just look at the question and then they go straight to the answer. Learn to answer the question. In fact, if you're doing a master's program, for example in the UK, if you're doing a master's program and you're answering a particular question and you didn't answer the question, you would fail. They've asked you, answer the question, you must answer the question. So most of the time, people don't answer the question, and then I'm worried because they just start writing and sharing unnecessary stories that are not important. So you have to learn to answer the question. So what are the question prompts? What are the essay prompts? What is it saying? So I will give an example here. So they said, and also learn how to also break the question prompts into different elements. So I will share an example here. So tell us about how you have demonstrated leadership, giving example from your life and work. So there are two elements in this question. You might start thinking already, like, what are the elements already? So there are two elements. The first element is talk about how you have demonstrated leadership, so that's the first element, and then back it up with examples from your work and lived experience. So that's like, when you answer that question, you have to tell them about how you have demonstrated leadership with examples from your work and lived experience. So you don't need to start beating around the bush. You just go straight to the point, right? So again, tell them how you have demonstrated leadership. And the second element is back it up with examples from your work and lived experience, right? So you could say that, this is, you've had the opportunity of working with children, blah, 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 blah. When or you could still start with a problem or a statistics or a data, or a story. So for example, when I wanted to answer this kind of question, again, I could say that, I have lived majority of my teenage years in underserved and rural communities. I lost my mom when I was 7, and my dad became unemployed at the same time. I also stayed out of school for academic term, and my brother stayed out of school for academic session. And this inspired me to start teaching when I was 15, and blah 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 blah. And and to give some specific example, I would like to share 2 of my leadership experience. In 2017, I found out that so numbers of people did this and this, and I found out this particular problem, and this led me to start an NGO that addresses this particular issue. So again, it shows, there's a sequence, in your response, basically, to respond to that question, basically. So answer the question, read the question prompt, and break them into elements. Fourth tip, be professional in your response. So understand the sector or program you are applying to, and when you quote a fact or data, cite them. So if, for example, you say like, 20 million children are currently out of school in Nigeria, who said that? Is it you? UNESCO 2021 or UNESCO 2022 or UNICEF 2022. Where did you get the data from? So it's very important you're professional in your response. Like, they understand, like, this person pay attention to the details and pay attention to, like, what they are saying and what they are writing, and I think they deserve this opportunity. So be professional in your response, understand the sector or program you're applying to, ensuring so that's one thing that I would mention. So the fifth one I'll be sharing with you, drive your response from a policy angle. And this is very important for people who are working in the development sector. I'm like, when I'm thinking about a solution, I'm not just thinking about a solution on a community level. I'm thinking about the policy implication of the particular solution that I am proposing, right? So if I'm proposing, helping children to develop life skills, students, secondary school students, what happens if the students drop out after giving them life skills? How do we ensure that they don't drop out of school? So I start thinking broadly, and I'm start thinking about the policy implication of the work that I am doing. And I'm like, as I'm addressing, key issues, I'm also thinking about what are the policy implications and how do we address this issue by engaging government, different stakeholders. So it's very, very important to look at that, So I could recall in one of my application that I was applying for educational policy and international development. I think it was Chimney Scholarship. And I wanted to talk about what I would do when I come back home, at the end of the program, what I would engage in as I go back to my NGO. And one of the gaps that I've identified is the fact that, teachers in training are not always engaged in solving societal problems, like student teachers. And when they solve societal problem, they can become transformative teachers. And by also learning to solve societal problem, they're also developing the life and 21st century skills. They are also, for example, if they create a pitch, they are learning contemporary pedagogies. They're learning how they can develop innovative teaching methods. So there's a kind of experiential learning that could help teachers in training to solve educational problem and educational challenges. and to also identify gaps and challenges that their children might be facing in the classroom once they get into the educational sector. And once they identify those challenges, that could indirectly reduce the rate of dropouts. And when that reduces the rate of dropouts, indirectly, it reduces the number of out-of-school children that we have. So I was thinking broadly, like, oh, that could be a very potential policy solution. And I proposed it in my, in one of my essays. And now I'm already implementing that particular project and idea. Like, I'm already implementing it. Even before I got the scholarship, I was like implementing that idea already. So you can think about the policy and go to your work. Sometimes it helps a lot, and it shows that you can scale at a larger impact. Understand the key and basic term of your industry. What are the key terms and basic terms in your industry? So for example, in education, there are different terms: alternative education, per pupil funding model, complementary basic education, global partnership in education. Understand the terms and weave them into your response in a simpler term, because you also want to be, you don't want to mention, big terms that, terms that are quite hard to understand without explaining them. So you want to be able to communicate them in a very simpler way that is able to understand. So for example, you could use, parentheses. So for example, if I say, per pupil funding model, where, you could say that is which students are being funded, or what it takes to fund each student based on their household income. Like, you could explain what it means, right? So it's very important to do that, use parentheses, that is, or you could put brackets, or you could do hyphen, to explain what you're trying to, like, the terms you're trying to communicate as well, in a very simpler way, in a very simpler terms. Let your why reflect in your essays or responses. So why do you do what you do? It must show, it's like a driver to your response. So a why can come from an observation, it could come from your personal story, it could come from a shocking statistics and data, like you're just too hungry because of this particular data and statistics, but our why can be personal. So how does the data reflect who you are? So I could recall there was a question that I was answering, and there was a time where we help like 6 out-of-school children, to get back to school and provide them access to primary school education. And what I said is that when I saw those children who were out of school, it reminds me of when I was out of school. So, and I see myself in the shocking statistics of 20 million of children who are currently out of school in Nigeria. Like, that's it. So that's your why, right? Because you're out of school and now this is this data, what it's saying. How do we change that? But because I go back to school, education changed many things for me. So you're looking at, you're personalizing your why. You're personalizing, that statistics, that data. It could be your story, it could be another person's story, but story helps in essence, and story helps to communicate our why. So personalize your why. Why are you, doing this work? Let it reflect in each of your essays. Let them see your why in your essays. Let it shine through. And most of the time, the problem I have with people is because, maybe because they feel like, oh, I just want to leave the country, or I want to run away, or I want to like travel to the US, or I want to go to I want to travel to Dubai, I want to go to Ethiopia, or whatever country you want to go to, because that's what you're fixated on. You forget to think that, you forget the reason why you're being sponsored, or the reason why you're being supported, is for you to be able to contribute to the community, to the larger community, wherever you are. Or the reason why you're supported is because you know with the knowledge you're going to transform your community and you're going to change something. So it's very important that your why shines through, because your why is what keeps you going, is why you do what you do. So let your why reflect in your essays or responses. You don't have to be a grammarian to get into program, but a good communicator. This has worked for me. I think some people, I've seen somebody write an essay and they were like sagacity, audacity, they all big vocabularies and grammar. And I'm like, no, you're not communicating. You need to communicate. You need to write in simpler terms. So just communicate. I think that's important. Like every of my essays, they are written in simpler terms, like full stop, continue again, very simple terms, like I believe children in rural communities can change their circumstances. Like, I just write in simpler terms. So, communicate and write in simpler terms. And if you're also scared of making errors in your essays, like we've gotten Grammarly, like Grammarly helps to review. Like, I pull some of my essays on Grammarly review them, not even the paid one, right? The free version. And, it helps me a lot to, like, correct some simpler terms or some places where I should have had comma, or places where I would have been clear in communication. So that could help you as well. Be logical and thoughtful, right? As you write, that's another tip, the 9 tip. I didn't even mention the other numbers basically, but now I'm on the 9 tips basically. If you're following, probably you would have helped me count, but now I'm on the 9 tips basically. And be logical and thoughtful in your response. Don't go around saying you have reached 50,000 when you have not, right? So how did you reach 50,000 is a question, or how did you reach 250,000? So you have to show your approach. Yeah, I'm not saying people cannot reach 250K or 1 million or 5,000 or 50,000 or above, or any number they want to reach out to, or they've reached out to. But how did you get to that point is the question. So I'm like, what's the approach? How did you do it? Did you leverage technology to do that? Did you leverage volunteer mobilization to do that? Because, and how are you tracking that progress? How are you tracking record? How are you monitoring? All of those things are really important as you write your essay, because that helps you to defend the numbers, in an interview. So for example, you got to an interview, like you might go to an interview and they were like, how did you arrive here? How did you get here? And then you can't answer. And that's why it's very important to be thoughtful and be logical in your response. And it's very easy for people to spotlight in essay applications, Although some people get away with this, I would suggest that you stay true to what you've done. Like, if you've reached out to 1,000 people or 150 people or 6 people, communicate that, there's nothing for me personally. There's nothing like big impact or small impact. Impact is impact for me, right? So it's how you communicate it. It's how you reflect on that impact. Like, for example, in 2019, that was when we reached out to like 6 out of school children, and they were just 6 children. Like, some people must have done 100 or 1,000, but I'm like, just 6. And I communicated the impact of those 6 children, right? And those 6 children got a scholarship for their primary school education. So imagine what that does to them and how it helps them change their circumstances, right? So think about the impact. Sometimes it's not about intensity of it's not about like, it's not about the intensity of the impact, like, oh, you're just giving one person one thing for one day and then you're gone. But how are you doing it every day, and how are you supporting those people continuously? So it's about like how you consistently support one person and how their circumstances change, and how it's a great story to tell and it's a great model for people to follow. That's also important. Numbers are good, but it's also good to show how people have been able to go through your intervention from the scratch, to the end. So how you're able to take somebody from here when they are nobody. Obviously there's somebody, but how do you take somebody from here to this point, to this particular point when they are now somebody? Like, how did that happen? How did you take somebody from, like, scoring 15 to now scoring 90 and 100? So it's important, so you have to be thoughtful and logical. So yeah, that's something I want to say. The 10th tip is, don't be a lazy applicant. Research about the program. Who are the alumni? Why was the program created? What change are alumni making? What event do you get to attend as a prospective scholar or fellow? Research. It helps you stand out in interviews. Like, if you research, like, you'll be blowing in interviews. Like, literally in my interviews, I already knew lecturers, I already knew the courses, I already knew, the program alumni, I already knew the project that has been run by the alumni program, I already knew the opportunities that people get. Like, research, read. Like, I don't know if people are not like hungry enough to want to get scholarship. Basically, like, I was literally reading and studying. Like, I was having a full-time job then. After my full-time job, once I'm done with my work, I'm going on, on YouTube, I'm reading, watching videos, typing. I would just, even sometimes when I'm in traffic, then, back then in Lagos, in traffic, I would just pick up my phone and start researching. I could recall even like also practicing my interview, practicing, like looking at my essays again, just trying to like, familiarize myself with my responses. Like it does help in interview, right? And it does help you also like coming up with a strong essay because you've researched, you understand what you're looking for, you understand the eligibility criteria. So don't be a lazy applicant, research about the program. And understand the needs of a particular scholarship or fellowship. Like what needs are the scholarship or fellowship meeting? For example, I'm a MasterCard Foundation scholarship alumni. I got a MasterCard Foundation scholarship in 2020. And I knew that MasterCard scholarship was focusing on transformative leadership and also focusing on giving back principle and community, leadership principle or community development principle. And they're also looking for like, talented African students, who probably are talented, but they don't have the resources to like study, to complete their master's degree. And I'm like, that's me. Like I fit all of these criteria. I meet all of these archetypes. And I'm like, go for it, Ahmed. Like smash this, you got this. And I understand the need of the scholarship. So what is the need of a particular scholarship? It's very important for you to know, right? Who are they looking for? I remember when I applied to IDS, they are looking for somebody who have experience in development. And I'm like, I'll give it to them. When they asked me to communicate my work experience, I started communicating my work experience as far back as 2008 when I volunteered as like an HIV or AIDS peer educator, right? I was a secondary school then. I was just 14 years old. God, I wrote every single experiences until like I got to 2019. Like that was how I, and I got this call. I'm like, this is it. If you're looking for somebody who has an experience in development, this person. It's me, Ahmed. It's me, Ahmed. I've done like different things. And rather than saying like, because I've worked from health to education to different kind of sectors. So what I did was I said, I said I have 12 years of experience in active citizenship and volunteering. I have gotten 11 years of experience in active citizenship and volunteering, and this is it. Starting with the most recent, and I started talking about that basically. So you have to understand the needs of a scholarship. That's the first skill of like of even winning or of getting to the next level, because you understand why the scholarship was created and the needs of the scholarship. So that's like 11 tips, and I've gone past 10 tips already. So the bonus tip that I'm going to be sharing is that do not doubt yourself. Be confident in who you are. Be confident in your ability. Be confident in the impact of what you've made, and don't also doubt yourself if you think you've worked. If you think you've worked and you've done the work, like don't doubt yourself. Like Nelson Mandela said something, there is no good in playing small when you have the capacity to do greater things. Like, why would you play small? Like, go for it, smash it, like believe in yourself, like this is me, I'm going to get the scholarship, right? And also be prepared for like rejections as well. I remember the friend used to say a quote, it's like, I have optimism of the will and the pessimism of the intellect. So it's like optimism of the will is like, you're like going to smash it, you believe in yourself, and pessimism of the intellect is like, okay, if rejection comes in, I'm also prepared for that as well. But again, do not doubt yourself. If you're in the room or you mind to get an interview, it's an opportunity to sell yourself and let them know how amazing you are beyond what you have written. You must leave an impression. However, you must do this with utmost sense of humility. Like, even if you've done a lot, like still communicate with humility. I mean, I do that a lot in my interview, like, with respect, with so much sense that you're looking forward to continue to learn from other people, that you can listen, you can learn, you can grow, you want to develop, you're curious, bring all of those things to your interview, like bring your unique self, who you truly are to your interview, and you're going to smash it. Like, you don't have to be somebody else, just be you. So, and again, this is not absolute, but basically this has worked for me, and these are the tips that have worked for me. And I want to appreciate AFM Stories for the opportunity to share this and to share these tips with other people. And I believe it's going to help many other people, and I believe probably my story would probably also inspire you as well based on the work that I've done.